We are back. Welcome to episode 91 of Seize the Moment podcast. We're back after a break. Of course, as you know, I'm Alen. That's
I'm
Leon.
Leon.
That's right. And we just had Michael Shermer on about 2 weeks ago, which was awesome. And we decided to go on a little vacation break, and we decided to come back and talk about the book, The Scout's Mindset by Julia Galef. Julia Galef, she's the founder of the Center for Applied Rationality. She hosts Rationality Speaking, the official podcast of the New York Skeptics. And the full title of the book is The Scout's Mindset, Why Some People See Things Clearly and Others Don't.
Yep.
And Leon actually put me onto this book. Could you tell me maybe why you were interested? Like what made you want to read it?
Yeah. So when I first saw the book, I thought the title was corny as fuck. So I was like, oh my God, another book. First of all, my thinking was another book about mindsets. Great. Right. Here we go. Right. You know, how many of those are out there?
Daniel
Um,
Kahneman, etc.
yeah. Well, actually, no, Kahneman never wrote a book about mindset. I mean, I guess
Biases.
technically, yeah.
Biases, right?
Actually, I'm wrong. You can actually consider that in the like mindset genre.
My bad. Carol Dweck.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm sure there were other people too, like about, and people, new age people and like self-help people frequently talk about mindsets. So when I saw the book title, I was like, ugh, the Scouts mindset. Like, what am I, 10? So of course, I kind of like brushed it off, and I said, forget it. This is not something I'd be interested in. Then I saw that Michael Shermer, who was obviously our guest, he did a review of it, right? And so honestly, man, before Michael Shermer was our guest, I might have even still brushed it off. I would have been like, oh, cool. I mean, they seem to be friends or whatever. He probably did a review. So, cool. But, after now talking to Michael Shermer, I guess it's just maybe a part of being human. His now like knowing him personally gives me more, or it gives him more weight in my mind in terms of his opinions. So I was like, oh, Michael Shermer wrote a review of it. And so I read a little bit of it about it. Yeah, I read like a snippet of it. And then I'm like, you know what? Damn, this is actually a really good book. Like, maybe I should kind of get into it and pick it up or whatever. So then obviously I told you about it. So why I love
That's why I wanted to read it. Yeah, but sorry,
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah. So after like actually reading about like the description and reading Shermer's, like a little bit of Shermer's review of it, why I really liked it was because I was like, oh, you know what? I actually struggle with being open-minded a lot, and I hold on to different identities. So my thinking was, you know what? Let me just see if she has anything to offer in terms of like being a little bit more unbiased, because obviously, I mean, as I'm sure you know, I have a tendency to kind of be argumentative and to stick to a particular side. And I figured, you know what? Maybe this could be a good like foray into maybe not foray, because I mean, I have read literature on open-mindedness before, but maybe this is a good like sort of next step into that kind of literature and being open-minded, critical thinking. So so I got into the book and I fucking loved it. Introduced you to it. Obviously, your idea was to do a book review. We talked about different books, and then we settled on this one. So yeah, I love the book. I can't wait to get into it. And what did you think?
Well, first of all, how I even got into it, one, it's by your recommendation, but then I realized it was written by Julia Galef. And, um, I don't know if you knew this about me, but like back in the day, I used to watch a lot of TED Talks.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so I actually did see her TED Talk on the Scout's Mindset, and I didn't recognize that
That's dope.
when you
Wow.
introduced the book. Yeah.
When was that?
Um,
Like 5 years ago or something?
I
Because
think
I
it
didn't.
was, yeah, 5 years ago, something
Yeah,
like that,
because I didn't
probably.
know about it. I didn't know like what that whole idea even was. Oh wow,
Yeah,
interesting.
that's
So
why
you
it didn't
already knew
occur to
about it.
me. Yeah, and then I started. I was like, oh yeah, Julia Gave. Why does that sound so familiar? Then I just kind of like looked her up, and I was like, oh, she did a TED talk on this. I remember this TED talk. Okay, cool.
Hmm.
So actually, upon reading the book, what I really like is she draws this sort of distinction between two specific kinds of mindsets.
Right.
One is what the book is named after, the Scout's mindset, and something called the soldier mindset.
Hmm.
And what was interesting is, so I guess let's start by like defining scout and soldier.
Yep.
So soldier mindset's about seeing the world the way you wish it was, about motivated reasoning, about biases, identifying with your beliefs, emotionally motivated actions. Although Scout could be like that too, but I'm just being general for defining sake.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, let's say this. It's sort of with that kind of thinking, just to distinguish it, it's probably that, in my kind of understanding, is that the emotions define your reason, right? So it's like your sort of desire to feel or think a certain thing makes you kind of think and feel it, right? Whereas opposed to, let's say, something that's let's say in terms of the scout mindset, the idea there is that there's a harmony between the two, right? Sort of your emotional side says this makes sense, and then kind of your rational side says, well, yeah, this is why you should believe in this. And it's sort of like after critical analysis.
yeah, and
Mhm.
soldiers also about sort of black and white thinking,
Right.
uh, needing to be right, nixing out pieces of information that don't fit into your current paradigm in order to preserve confidence, right? Which is fine, it's useful skill, but okay, this is just us defining it. I guess we'll get into its uses and misuses after.
Right.
Then the scout mindset is interesting. It's about seeing the world as accurately as possible. It's
Hmm.
about um, being able to take in new information and being able to change your mind. It doesn't have the short term gratification that maybe a soldier mindset does. But for example, by attempting to have as accurate of a map of the world as possible, that'll lead you to make better, more informed decisions, right?
Hmm.
For example, if as opposed to being reactive in a conversation with someone and getting, I suppose, into an argument, maybe seeing why they think the way they do, for instance, or try to understand them, will in the long term be good for that particular relationship. Whereas you would have this back and forth argument, you would instead probably be having more of as you said earlier, like a sort of harmony,
Right.
right? And that's just one example. Another one would be just in general not being reactive to new information, right? Um, being able to let yourself, for example, maintain your current paradigm of the world. It's not about being um, so here's the thing: soldier mindset. It's about maintaining certainty,
Right.
right? About your worldview. Scout's mindset is about still maintaining you still maintain your confidence, that you can still be self-assured and have the scout's mindset, but it's about allowing yourself to still remain confused, or allow yourself to sort of know that there may be counterpoints to your argument. I think Julia Galef uses an example. I don't remember if it's in the book or I heard it from her TED talk before. I might be
Could be
confounding
both.
things.
Could be both.
Could be both. When she's talking about Darwin, when he was
Yeah.
coming up with
But-
this theory of evolution, if he was operating from motivational reasoning, or soldier's mindset, he would um, just confidently sort of present his theory of evolution and just kind of not try to look for any issues with it, because depending on your audience, if
Mhm.
it's not a well-informed audience,
Mhm.
then yeah, if you're confident and you just present yourself a certain way, they may just accept the information without questioning it.
Right.
But if you what was good about Darwin was he actually looked for reasons why um, his theory could be wrong.
Right.
And what helped, why that was good is because it helped create a more solid theory, right? It created more reasons for why it could possibly be true and made a more solid argument. And he was more fascinated with being like a truth seeker.
Right.
He valued truth above being right,
Yeah.
right? And that in the long term served him because again created a stronger theory.
Yeah. And you know what's so interesting about that? The part that I loved so much was that like how it factored in particular biases that we have. So I know she didn't say that in the book because the way she kind of viewed it was so like, it was sort of like she sort of skimmed, maybe not skimmed, but she gave you an outline of what Darwin's thought was, where she said, she mentioned the example of peacocks, and she said, well, peacocks have these bright feathers, which obviously makes them more susceptible to prey. So wouldn't nature like select them out, right? Wouldn't they sort of kick them out of the ecosphere, right? But Darwin eventually realized, oh, there's this thing called sexual selection. So the idea is that because these peacocks are beautiful, they were actually more likely to mate. But what's so cool about that is that you actually have these biases in that example, because you know how like when I'm sure you've had this, where you like kind of, so let's say you see some like beautiful person, right? Let's say a beautiful girl, right? And automatically the bias is, oh, this person is really valuable, right? Obviously. And so
Sure.
you make this 1 to 2 connection, right? You jump to the conclusion of this person is valuable because they're beautiful, right? Sexual selection. Then you may get to know the person and you're like, wow, this person actually kind of sucks, right? They're super, maybe, I don't know if lazy, I don't want to call anybody lazy, but let's say you're like, they're not that motivated to like, contribute to this relationship. Let's say they don't really have any particular interest in any academic issues or topics. They don't necessarily want to work for a living. And then you're like, you know what? I made a mistake in getting involved in this relationship. So what I love about Darwin's sort of thinking is that it implicitly takes those cognitive biases and puts them at the fore, maybe not at the fore, but at least partially at the fore of selection, where the idea is it's not just nature that kind of selects who we are, right? It's actually even our biases that contribute to the evolution of ourselves, of our species. So what was cool about that is that like you could kind of see that cognitive distortions are even like fundamental to evolution. Like, what did you think
No,
about
for
that?
sure. No, for sure. Those distortions are all about survival, right? We rationalize in our favor. Anything that promotes survival is, I mean, for example, believing that you're right or maintaining your confidence, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so basic to our survival, right?
Yeah. I
For
like that.
instance,
Can I just add on to that really quick,
yeah,
just
please.
for
Yeah.
the audience? Why I like what you said is that it indirectly kind of relates to our survival, right? With confidence. So the idea there is, let's say if you have a beautiful partner, you get to feel good about yourself, right? If you feel good about yourself, you're more likely to sort of get yourself up in the morning. Right now you're motivated to hunt, you're motivated to forage for food, you're like, oh, I'm like the big man in the tribe, right? You're
Yeah.
motivated to take care of your partner, obviously, because now you want to hold on to them, right? And you feel confident too because you're like, oh, this person must see something in me. So sexual selection is so great because well, maybe not great, but sexual selection is such an intricate,
It's great.
yeah,
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
it's such a like intricate part of natural selection. I mean, if that was his thinking, it's such an intricate part of natural selection because like literally with sexual selection and with that self-esteem that you just mentioned, that person actually, and it can obviously be a woman, man, any person of any gender, where the idea is because you feel good because of, let's say, the partner that you have, maybe the attention and the affection that they're giving you. Now you get to go off into the world, right? And you're motivated to take care of yourself, your family, and pretty much live. It's usually not that simple, obviously. There are more factors to it. But the point is that like it's so important because you can actually see how significant these distortions can sometimes be. And by the way, and I'm sure you saw this, right? That's what I think she was pointing to. Like when you're looking at the scout mindset, it's like you can stop me if you feel like I'm going like completely kind of off board here. But like it's like, let's say soldier mindset, right? This girl is really beautiful. She makes me feel good about myself, right? She's actually kind of an asshole. All of my friends are like, hey, dude, you probably shouldn't date her because she sucks. You're like, no, you're just jealous. You don't want to see me happy. You can't get this kind of girl, or you can't get somebody that attractive. So I'm not going to listen to you anymore, right? So, and
Right.
that's like a great example of soldier mindset, where the idea is you want to defend this thing that makes you feel good about yourself.
Right. And I suppose somebody coming from a scout mindset might actually start to be like, you know what? Yeah, I actually have to weigh what are the pros and cons here with this particular partner,
Right.
right? Yeah, like okay, yeah, I'm physically attracted. Yes, very kind, but our values aren't all the same, and they come into conflict. She may not like my friends, right? Or she dislikes my best friend or whatever, or something like that. Or maybe I hold an interest that she really hates and wishes I didn't do, but that's so intrinsic to my life and something that I feel makes me me, or something that just feels so right for me to do, and they're at odds, right?
Yeah.
And you start to weigh, oh, what another partner who I also find who's also kind, but likes my friends, gets the opposite there.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, there's more things to consider than just that, obviously, but this, it works for the example.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's such a good example of motivated reasoning, right? Because you have like an intrinsic sort of desire to see that person a certain way and to see your opponent, right? The person who's like, hey, dude, I'm like actually trying to help you, to see them in the more negative light, to say like, oh, well, they have ulterior motives.
right. So, for example, I'm happy you brought up this example. Yeah. So, if somebody were operating from Scout and your friend is telling you, who you know for however many years or however long you know them, I'm noticing this, this, and this. Well, a soldier, right, would react immediately like, no, what are you doing? You're against me. Like,
Right.
how could you say this? Blah, blah, blah. That kind of mindset. Scout might be like, this stings. Like, this really stings. Like, I still feel that, like, this is a very strange sensation that you're explaining this to me. Cause now, my view is at odds, but there's a reason you're saying this to me. So maybe I should listen and see why you're saying what you're saying.
Hmm.
And then sometime, and you know what if your friend could be wrong too,
That's true. Yeah.
but by being fair with that sort of scout mindset, maybe you can either suss out why they're right, and then maybe then you see their point, and
Hmm.
actually they're trying to be helpful to you,
Hmm.
or maybe you do find out that he's noticing something that's bad that needs addressing, and your view is not entirely wrong either because you explain yourself to your friend,
Right.
and maybe they get some kind of insight based on how you're currently feeling too, because a lot of times in those situations where you're at odds, they also are thinking, you're lost to this perspective,
Hmm.
like, oh, you're married to this point of view.
Right.
You would show them that you're not, and then maybe they're more open to whoever they are having an issue with in
Right.
your life.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a mixed bag, but the thing is, what's fantastic about this is at the end of it, um again, you kind of get a more accurate map of what's going on, and that allows you to navigate the territory, so to speak, more accurately, and make better, more informed decisions in the long term,
Right.
which is important because especially when you're dealing with your friends, right?
Hmm.
Because they're going to be there for a while. Your partner, I mean, barring divorce, breakup, this, that, they're probably going to be there for a while,
Right.
and having these reactive back and forths, it feels right due to your impulses in the moment because you want to preserve confidence, you want to preserve your view,
Right.
all of that, but it doesn't serve you in the long term. So it's like what Julia does fantastically in the book is she sort of gives all of these reasons why it's so beneficial to operate from Scout.
Hmm.
Um, Even though a lot of us feel motivated to act from Soldier.
Right. And I like how she links pride to it. That's actually something that I try to focus on in therapy too with people, is that like if you feel good about yourself, let's say by going to the gym, right? You're somebody who's committed. Let's say if you feel good about yourself by being open-minded, you're like, well, I want to take these other views into consideration because this is a part of my identity. So I like how she sort of doesn't say let's take identity out of it, because that's not possible, right? Honestly, I thought that's where she was going at first. I was like, oh God, she's probably gonna say, yeah, don't identify with your bully. You can't do that, right? So what I think, what I love, it's not one way, I guess, what I think. What I love what she says is that she says don't over identify with your beliefs, where the idea is that your beliefs are part of a system and a part of a self-image, but hold on to it a little bit loosely, where the idea is like if you're a Democrat, right, you don't have to necessarily agree with everything Democrats say. If you're a feminist, you don't have to agree with everything feminists say, and obviously not the more extreme ones, because for the most part people stay away from extreme views. And so where for her, right, whereas maybe for somebody else the idea is like, well, I feel good about myself because I'm a part of this bigger thing, where I'm an activist, I'm a Democrat, I'm a feminist, whatever. For her, it's like, no, no, you could still feel good about these things, right? But also feel good about being open-minded, about being curious, being effective. You remember obviously how we had Rachel on the show and talked about effective altruism. The idea for her is that I'm assuming there's some things maybe she didn't particularly want to do in terms of, kind of the way she spent her donations. Let's say, how people, when people say like, would you rather, let's say, put X amount of money into this bigger cause or help somebody in need who's like right in front of you? Obviously, most people would say, no, I'd rather do the latter. But the idea is the former is actually much more effective. So sometimes people are like, oh, am I a bad person for doing that? So for her, what I really like is that she's like, look, man, it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay, obviously, for you to kind of de-identify, or a little bit, right, to some extent, to de-identify with your beliefs, because the idea is then you're kind of more honest, more you're acting more in good faith, right? You're more honest, you're more sincere, your intentions, if you like, I guess your intentions are, I don't want to say good, but your intentions are more mature, right? You have the idea of like wanting to grow and learn. And I think for her, in my interpretation, that's more important than the actual label, like Democrat, right? Anybody can call themselves a Democrat. To be able to call yourself a mature critical thinker, I think it actually takes a lot of evidence. Well, a lot of evidence of your work, of your work ethic, of your diligence, of your sort of, let's say, resolve, right? So that takes a lot. Whereas as opposed to being like a Democrat, being, even a feminist, being whatever, all you have to really do is just subscribe to a particular, set of beliefs, if, that's what you want to do. Whereas like being, let's say, a scout, is whatever that really, I guess, even is. But to be a scout, the idea there is that you have to actually put work into it. And there's a lot of effort involved. Whereas again, I don't think for other labels there is, even though I could sense that there's a sense of pride, obviously. It's, it's a good distinction. It's sort of the distinction between saying, I'm a hard worker as opposed to I'm an American, right? Why would I be proud of being an American? Who cares? I live in America. I didn't do anything. I'm literally just in America, as opposed to saying, well, I'm proud of myself for being a hard worker, or I'm proud of myself for being open-minded. No, that's stuff that I actually have to work toward. Like, these are traits that I have to like work toward becoming, or let's say putting myself into or taking on, as opposed to like being an American, like being a Democrat. Like, who cares, right? To me, it's like there's no work ethic involved.
I mean, yeah, it's very nuanced. Like, it's like that Chris Rock joke. There's some things that I'm liberal about, and there's some things I'm conservative about.
Right.
Money, conservative.
Mm-hmm.
Prostitution, legal. I mean,
liberal.
Liberal.
Yeah.
Prostitution, liberal. And I mean, that joke, is cool because I mean, there are some things that, I mean, for example, if you adhere to everything that your label means, right? Like Democrat, for instance, or Republican, or whatever, then any opposing idea, you just because you're identifying with a particular belief, group, or tribe, you kind of nix out to preserve that identity, right?
Right.
But if you identify a little bit less, the way Julia kind of puts it, then you're able to take on new information. You're able to adjust. You're able to adapt. You're able to see what the other side thinks, right?
Right.
I think it's just, again, just like Darwin, right? If of course, you can have all the reasons for why your theory, your side, your perspective is right, but if you know what the other side is thinking, or what other sides, because there's a vast, broad political spectrum, right? Libertarian, etc. All these other things. Then you would have a more solid argument for whatever it is that you think, because you've taken into account all of these other perspectives and were able to integrate them.
Right.
It demonstrates also a sort of thoughtfulness too. And also, anyone who isn't let's say, if whoever's arguing for their side, let's say they're a Democrat, let's say the person listening is a Republican, well, maybe because this Democrat is taking on this scout's mindset as being so thoughtful,
Right.
then because they're demonstrating that, they're like, oh, okay, this guy's making, or this person is making some good points, I'm not used to that. I'm not going to necessarily become a Democrat right now, but now I feel a little bit less like they're all I don't know, libtards, or whatever the other side says, or whatever liberals say about conservatives, like
That's what happened. And that's what happened with me and Jordan Peterson, which obviously you know about. Like, literally for the longest time.
You guys personally were brawling with each other. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Yeah, for the longest time, I was like, damn, this guy sucks, man. And I kind of stayed away from talking about it because I didn't know that much about him. But after finally like listening to his podcasts and like just reading a little bit of his work, I'm like, oh shit, the way he's caricatured and misrepresented, I mean, it's pretty obviously egregious. So yeah, it was the same thing. I mean, I don't agree with his libertarian views. And by the way, I don't obviously think that tyranny is like on the cusp of like, what was this thinking about it? It was like tyranny is sort of like on the verge or on the cusp of like coming to fruition in the US. And we're like a step away from it. And right. And he's obsessed with all of these tyrants who are painted all over his walls. I don't think it's that serious. That's my interpretation. But yeah, no, he has some really interesting ideas. And I mean, yeah, if I just stayed away from it thinking like, oh, he's a conservative, fuck him, I would have never listened to him.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I would say, I mean, it's just like sort of that narrative of, you know, if we had a World War III, let's say, it would be mutually assured destruction,
Yes.
which it would be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's that narrative that keeps people from initiating that. In a way, his sort of fear of the worst case scenario. We might need a guy like that. I'm not certain yet. I haven't made up my mind, but because again, you're probably right. We may not really be on the cusp of that, but
yeah, I mean, he sounds like somebody who's struggling with an anxiety disorder.
Yeah.
No,
Sorry, I don't know why that's funny to me.
I don't even.
I agree with you.
That's not offensive.
I don't know why that's funny.
Yeah. Because in my mind, I see he catastrophizes a lot. So it's like, let's say if I had a client like him, I mean, it's not that I wouldn't take him seriously because he's right in the sense of it being a possibility. Obviously, right? There's no question. But the way he frames it, it's like it's such a likelihood that we're like a second away from it, right? I just don't think it's that serious, right? Just based on everything I've seen, you know, the sort of things I know about people, you know, documentaries I've seen about people, even the fact that we've come to nuclear war, come close to nuclear war so many times and still managed to avert it. So, you know what? Maybe we're both right. Maybe it's something in the middle. Maybe it's not as like, I shouldn't be as lackadaisical as I am, but it's also, I think, not as serious as he thinks it is, right? But yeah, no, I'm definitely not disparaging him by saying he has generalized anxiety. I just think
no worries. I just thought it was funny. Sorry. But just a quick thing. Yeah, I think that he is a good example of somebody who employs Scout's mindset.
Right.
Because a lot of times in his discussions, it doesn't matter who he's speaking to. He always does something called steel manning, which we've discussed on the show before, where he'll outline what he thinks their viewpoint is and argue for it, and then also explain what he thinks, and then tries to come to some sort of integrated understanding by the end of their talk. Right. And it's a cool little structure that I think is it's definitely not motivated reasoning. He definitely doesn't seem like he's arguing for some point and then so reactive when he's not right or someone says something counter to what he thinks. So yeah, he's a good example of that. And in general, the Scout's mindset, I mean, knowing, I'll go off on a little tangent here, but knowing your strengths and weaknesses, for instance, right? As opposed to, let's say a soldier might think that relative to other people, they're above average in certain personality traits or intelligence and things of that nature. However, and that's fine. That's good. It's again, to be self-enhancing, to have positive illusions. It is self-serving, but the thing is, it's not clear how much it really serves people. Because, I mean, if you ask somebody, would you rate your life, you know, the circumstances of your life above average, or how you feel about life above average? Most people, just to look good, for instance, they're going to put that they feel good about it. So that kind of skews the results. Correct. They may just be self-deceiving, and that's sort of masquerading as a positive illusion. And they have this, you know, people who are self-enhancing, have more positive outlooks on life. You might draw that conclusion, but it's not necessarily clear. Somebody who's coming from the Scout mindset would know what their strengths and weaknesses are. Like maybe my friend is an incredible writer, for example, right? And I may be a writer, but let's say I haven't written something in a while, and then I truly ask myself, you know, like, okay, if I were to say which one of us should write something right now for whatever reason, probably it's gonna be him. And then yeah, I'm joking, yeah, and yeah, no, Like the audience doesn't know, it's very inside. It's like literally
Yeah.
myself and Leon right now. But there may be other things where I'm strong in, or something that I'm weak in, and then sort of acknowledging where my strengths and weaknesses are. It's not gonna ruin my confidence. It's actually just gonna make me play to my strengths more. And then since we're a team, whatever you're strong in, like it just sort of we just work in a sort of synergy, or allow for that synergy to occur, as opposed to soldier and duking it out, or I don't know why we would. I think that doesn't necessarily work in this example, but you kind of get what I'm saying. It's like, again, knowing what you can do and can't do makes you more informed on your current and future decisions,
Yeah.
right? And then it probably leads to more success. I mean, I think she used Jeff Bezos and
Yeah. Musk.
Elon Musk
Hmm.
example. Elon Musk, I think he said that the chances of Tesla or some of his other companies being successful was 10%.
Yeah. You know
And
what?
some,
I
yeah,
love that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. How crazy was that? Like, just I'm curious about your opinion, right? Because so to our audience, we actually haven't talked about this book at all. So this is literally the first time we're actually like really sitting down to talk about it. So
yeah,
what was your opinion on that, right? Because the norm is usually like you have to be overconfident, right? And how many people have we met who are like, nah, bro, you got to believe in yourself. It's all about believing in yourself. But then she was like, actually, no, you don't have to necessarily believe in yourself. You have to have an accurate estimation of the odds. So what did you think about that? Because that's super interesting to me.
well, I mean, here's the thing. Even if he understood that he had like a 10% chance of success,
Mhm.
it's she uses an example of would you bet $10 to win $200,
Right.
right? So even though he knew that his chances of success were low, it didn't stop him from acting still. Somebody in a soldier mindset might be like, no, 80%, or no, this is definitely going to work.
Yeah.
But he would just more, I feel like knowing what you're working with, what you can do, what you can't do,
Mhm.
and it helps you again. Like I feel like I'm repeating something from earlier, so sorry to the audience, but it helps you again to navigate the territory better. I
Yeah.
feel like it increases your chances of success by knowing what your chances actually are,
Yeah.
right? As opposed,
And confidence too.
yeah,
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 because you're
oh
like,
yeah,
why would I take
confidence.
this personally, right? What's there to take personally if I know that there's a 10% chance of my business succeeding? Just like with our podcast, right? Let's say, if we're just starting out and the idea is like, we're getting 20 views or whatever per episode. Why would we take that personally? We're like nobody. Who cares? Nobody knows who we are. We haven't had any guests on. It's nice that even 20 people are listening to us and taking us somewhat seriously.
Sure. No, that's true. That's a good mindset. Yeah, I mean, I suppose. Okay, if you want to take it there, let's take it there for a second. Uh, yeah, there's right now over 1 million podcasts. I think even so, Rogan, for example, used to tell everybody like, make your own podcast. It's all do
Yes,
it.
he says
He,
that all the time still. Yeah.
no, he changed it.
Oh, did he? When?
Yeah, he literally somebody like a Tim Dillon also, or like, yeah, I don't think you should. If you're gonna start a podcast, don't start it right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're like, if you do, it has to be incredibly niche. That's the
Wow.
only way now you'd be is what they say. And I
Right.
was, and I listened to it because I mean, yeah, it makes sense, right? If there's 1 million of them, right? I mean, that's a lot of people, depending
A
on
lot of perusing.
a lot of perusing. Now, here's the thing. I also think there are other factors to take into consideration. Like one is how consistently does somebody do their podcast, number one.
Right.
What's the content like? What sort of engagement do they get from the listeners? Do those listeners share with their friends and all that? Like there are things to take into consideration. And I feel like that's what lets, how the cream rises to the, wait, is that the saying?
Yes, to the top, to the top.
Okay, I almost like cream of
Yeah.
the crop as
No,
well.
no,
Okay.
no. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
whoops. All right, well anyway, yeah, so I mean, even I wouldn't let, knowing 1 million of them exist discourage somebody from doing it. But it is good to know what your odds of success are, and then to still, if you still want to act in spite of it, at least again you're more informed about what the situation is. I mean, for example, say you were delusionally thinking we're going to be the best, or one of the best, we're going to be one of the names out there.
It's Rogan, seize the moment.
Yeah, and like, and that's cool and all, like to have a goal or like somewhere you're shooting towards, right? But at the same time, like imagine somebody completely motivated by coming from soldier mindset. They would be so devastated and probably not so resilient, and it would be very hard to continue working if they were met with such
failure.
With failure,
because if
or just expectations not being met.
I would say that is definitely failure, my kind of understanding, because it's like if your expectations are met, you fail to meet them.
Yeah, but if you have more sort of accurate expectations or predictions, or for example, again, like this goes back to something we said way earlier in a podcast. I forgot when this was, but it's definitely one of the earlier episodes we were talking about. Well, I mean, incrementally, if you keep doing what you're doing, right? One, you get better at it, right? Also, I'll credit this. I saw an article. I was on Facebook, just scrolling. Mm-hmm. Even I scroll. So I was scrolling.
The great Alen scrolls.
The great Alen scrolls. It's a joke. But anyway, it was some kind of economy article. I don't remember what brand it was. But anyway, Ryan Reynolds was saying something along the lines of you have to be willing to look bad or stupid, or willing to fail in order to be successful. Right. So, for instance, when we first started the podcast, we don't know anything. We don't know shit about podcasting. Right.
Especially on the tech side.
Especially on the tech side. Mm-hmm. Right. That's definitely that has its own learning curve. And then just in general, getting comfortable with speaking, getting comfortable with the presentation, getting comfortable with getting guests and blah, 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 blah. And if you sort of know that there's an incremental improvement that takes place, for instance, that's sort of a realistic expectation to have, that you'll incrementally get better. Mm-hmm. And if you know you're 1% better or 0.1% better each day, after a year or 2 or 3 or so on and so forth, you sort of get this, you get a different sort of result or emergent, right? Mm-hmm. Yep. There are these different variables also that like we change up as we go on, right? And that creates a different result as well. I like to think of it, I'm not like I like math. I'm not, that high level in math, but I like to think of it like this. If we keep changing the X variable in the equation, or the Y variable, whatever, mm-hmm. no matter whatever result we get will be a different result. Will it be better or worse or all that? That's a different thing that we have to take into consideration, the nuance of that. Mm-hmm. But no matter what, as long as we know and we have an expectation that if we change one thing or another thing, that we will definitely have some sort of different result, right, then at least that also gives a sort of not hope, but an expectation that's more attainable, as opposed to like, we're gonna be the very best,
I thought you were about to sing the Pokemon
song. Yeah, I was.
I like the melody.
Right.
Yeah, the melody was behind it.
Yeah.
You know what I've always liked, that you've always had the mindset of, what value are we producing or providing for like the consumer, or I guess maybe we can't call our audience consumer, or maybe they are. Whatever.
I don't think of it like that, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, consumer in the sense of like consumer of information, obviously, because our podcast is free. So the point is, like, the way I like the way you think about it that way, in terms of what's the value that they provide, because you can never go wrong there, right? So it's pretty much the same thing as saying, by admitting that I was wrong in this particular area, I get to feel good about myself knowing that, I'm a mature adult who's able to admit some error, right? So you get to feel some level of pride. And it's the same thing with the podcast, right? If you think about it in terms of, did I do something good for someone today? AKA, am I a good person, to whatever extent? And then I can feel good about myself and knowing that, like, let's say, again, if even 20 people watch the show, we've provided some value for them. Obviously, as opposed to the overarching goal, which is maybe not overarching, but let's say one of the bigger goals, which is obviously, to have a large scale audience, right? And to someday do it in a way where, we get recognition and maybe even advertisements for it. So, but the idea there is that it's like, I guess if you're, that sort of saying, if you're doing it for the right reasons, you can never go wrong. I think that's kind of it. So I've always liked that and appreciated your mindset, even though, by the way, it's incredibly fucking hard for me to maintain. But I've always
It's
liked
not
that.
easy either.
Yeah. I try to like pivot to it every time that, let's say obviously we do an episode that doesn't do so well, or maybe obviously when we can't find guests, which is obviously incredibly hard. I always have to remind myself, well, look at, the body of work, and there was some value that obviously we provided for people, which is great. And we probably even broadened, I'm not saying we did this to a large extent, but I'm sure we broadened the audience for some of our guests to some minor extent. I'm sure some of those, folks actually kind of ended up getting a wider audience than they would have otherwise, which is great.
Check this out.
Yeah.
Let's scout mindset this just for fun.
Uh-huh.
Say hypothetically, I'm gonna take I don't know if you want to call it devil's advocate or a contrarian sort of point of view. Say we say we didn't help anybody. Say like whoever watches, they watch for 1 minute, and that's what we think are the views.
Yes.
And whatever.
Yeah.
Say it's the worst possible case scenario. Even then, you still could rationalize a way that it's beneficial. Because here, check this out. So you write a blog. You are a mental health professional. You have a track record of episodes where you talk in long form about your views on certain or interview people and all of that, and that's incredibly valuable, just even selfishly. Not that you should, I'm not, again,
I understand.
Not that you should go there, but I'm just saying, worst case scenario, even then you have this long track record of things that help your business, help your blog, which is like another main thing that you do. Who knows what else that could bolster in the future as well, if you take on another endeavor, whatever that is, right? For me too, I don't have much of a presence online. I mean, yeah, there's ego ends now. That's cool. Don't get me wrong. Awesome. But talking in long form like this is good. It's beneficial to people, right? Or at least that's our hope, right? And what does that demonstrate? You do it for free. Like, what kind of person does that? I'm not trying to give myself or you points or whatever. Just let's try to be like as objective as possible for a second. Like, what does that say about a person that you're trying to offer value for free? Like, what do you, somebody could rationalize like, okay, you guys are bored. You guys are just, trying to, you could be self-deluding or whatever.
I mean, all of those things could be true.
I'm scout mindsetting.
Yeah, no,
I'm just doing that just for fun.
And it's probably true that all of those things are true to some extent.
You know what? The fact that you said it's probably true, even though I kind of probably know what you in your heart of hearts probably actually feel, that adds more solidity to your current paradigm, which is still the overarching one we discussed earlier, which is, again, it's to help people, it's to create value, it's, if it helps somebody, it's worth doing, right? And that's why it's important that even like we're, as an example, employing the Scouts mindset right now, because it gives more solidity to the paradigm, even if we're confused, even if we know there are these contrarian sort of perspectives that could be taken and, if believed in, could totally throw you off or something like that. But acknowledging it, I feel like, as opposed to not acknowledging it, allows you to navigate the territory more. If you are met with something that doesn't meet your expectation, then you're more able to deal with it, so to speak. It's not easy. It's not comfortable. Julia Galef also says it stings to do this. I think even when she was coming up with this arguments pro and con of the soldier mindset. She had a totally different like she was going to say way more cons about the soldier mindset, but after doing some research, this is a very general thing, I don't remember it fully, but after doing more research she was like, oh shit, okay, damn, I was wrong about um all these cons about it. All right, it won't help my book as much, but okay, I'll I'll take on this new information and adapt. And
Yeah.
I would actually arguably say that it does help her book, in my opinion, to,
Yeah.
you know, still say what could be wrong about your theory or about your argument, because I don't know, I trust people who do that more, you know.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I like that she said that too about like overconfidence, where even though like in the short term, it's by the way very similar to beauty, right? In the short term, if you see a beautiful person, just like you see a confident person, you're like, wow, oh my God, this person is really valuable. I want to be around them. But then obviously, if they're overconfident, they never admit their mistakes. You could kind of tell that they don't do much of the work. You know, they sort of like just spitball things that sound really incredibly intelligent and, you know, sort of let's say valuable. The idea there is that it eventually all falls apart. So what the thing is that I like that she said was that with the soldier mindset, the idea there is that if you're sort of protecting yourself, it's going to work. I mean, nobody's saying it's not going to work, right? You're defending your beliefs. Somebody's going to buy into your argument, even if it's wrong. The point is that after some time, it's going to fall apart. You're going to lose followers. You're probably even going to lose friends because people don't like being around people who can't admit their mistakes. And so after a while, you're going to be bored and sort of lonely and, you know, miserable. So the idea there is like with like, not to get too much into this, but with pathological narcissism. So
mhm.
pathological narcissists tend to be really attractive and really confident, right? So the double, the shebang, right? You get both in one person and you're like, oh my God, this human is amazing. But then you get to know them and you're like, okay, I guess they're pretty or they're beautiful, they're handsome, whatever. But you know what? They're kind of an asshole. They don't like to admit their mistakes. They don't like being criticized. They get super defensive. They don't work well with others. They think everybody's jealous of them. They think everybody's plotting against them, you know, yada, yada, yada. So eventually what you realize is with that kind of mindset is that after some time, like it all falls apart. So, but in the short term, as she says, it's wonderful. It's great to do. Maybe not wonderful, but it's something that can work, right? It's something that in the short term can get you the followers, believers, if you will, get you even the friends, acquaintances, or whatever, dates, get you laid, right? It can get you all of those things that you're looking
Yeah.
for. But if we're talking about long-term established relationships and even a long-term sense of expertise, right, where other people sort of see you as that expert, you're not really going to get that. You're going to eventually have some people follow you, by the way, because I mean, sometimes, you know, con men will always have people to con. But the idea there is that like most people who are more thoughtful will eventually see through the charade and will be like, yo, I'm not talking to this person. And it's sort of like, and that's another thing not to get too much into, but in the episode Jordan Peterson had with Michael Shermer, I like that they debunked the myth that most Germans actually didn't follow Hitler in the way that people think. That it wasn't so much that Hitler was this great orator and con man, even though he was, but it wasn't so much that. It was more so along the lines of once he built up enough of the minority party, they literally scared the shit out of so many German people who were definitely anti-Semitic. That wasn't the case, right? It's just that they scared the shit out of them so much that they figured, you know what? I'd rather just toe the line and do what the expectation is, then obviously resist and rebel. So, but the myth there is that like, oh, someone like a Hitler, like a Trump or whatever, let's say they could kind of like convince masses of people to follow them. So that's not true. So the point that I think she was making with the mindsets, or one of the points, was that essentially with the soldier mindset, you can definitely get some people to follow you in the long term, but most people will eventually kind of like wither away. And then for the most part, even though it hurts in the kind of moment where you're telling yourself and you're telling other people I'm wrong, what's going to happen is those people are eventually going to respect you, or even in that moment respect you, and then you're going to actually build up the network that you're looking for, even though it seems like counterintuitive, right? It's like, oh, if I'm wrong, this person is going to think I'm stupid. Not if they're mature.
Mm.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I really like that she did in the book, I forgot, there were some tests that demonstrate or that would help somebody to sort of garner a scout's mindset.
Oh, did you do them?
It's not that I did
I
them; they
could,
were
t- I
thought
could tell,
experiments.
I could tell you my results. They were embarrassing. You want to hear them?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's super embarrassing. Hold on, let me just flip it around.
Just in case, wait, just to make sure we're on the same page, you're talking about like where they had the conformity test, the double standard test, like that, or you're talking about something different?
Wait, no, I'm talking about, actually, I think it is different. So do you remember the part where she mentioned, where she had you do like the thought experiments? Oh, because you had the audio version. Okay, so she had you do like the thought experiment, and then you had to assign a probability to where you think you were right. So it's like who was older, like
Like
Genghis.
Spock?
Yeah. Did you do that one?
No, but I understood what she was saying. Like assigning a probability to how, what
Yeah.
percentage you could be right helps you to
But
sort of gauge
yep. All right. So
accuracy. Yeah.
can I read you my results?
Hmm.
This is how bad it was. So do you remember like there was a section for 55% sure? Right. So, okay. So for 55% sure, right. So it's just for the audience. So it was like you would split it up, right? And then you would have like results. So it looks something like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what you would have is column A is the number of times you were right. Column B is the number of times you were wrong, and you would put it into a percentage. And then the percentage of the time, and the last column is percentage of the time you're right at this confidence level. So let's say if 50%, 55% sure, you would pretty much write whatever percentage you were right on.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm sorry, whatever percentage you were right. So let's say for 55% sure, right, I was right 81% of the time. I was like, yeah, see, I'm like on a roll. Then it gets really bad. So for 65% sure, where I was like, okay, I feel like it's more than random that I'm right. Or I'm sorry, not more than random, that it's more than I guess whatever, more than chance, right? I'm sure, I think I know this is true. Then I went down to 50%. The times that I was 75% sure, I was stayed at 50%. The times I was 85% sure, I fucking stayed at 50%. And then the worst part is that when I was 95% sure, I literally was at and am at 25%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, crazy, right? I thought I was going to go up, right? I was like, oh, the times where it's like, the flip of a coin, I'll probably be like 50%. It's going to probably go up as, it goes up to 65, 75, and then at 95, I'm like, I'm sure I'm going to be like at 100. There's no way, right? I'm going to be batting 1,000. No, man, I actually got worse. So that's overconfidence.
Why I like that section of the book, it's something I resonate with actually. So a lot of times when I think of perspectives, or let's say whether I'm right to think a certain thing or wrong, or whatever view I have, how accurate it is.
Mhm.
I do this thing where I'll have a whole bunch of floating um, either perspectives or possibilities of what could be happening,
Right.
what is happening, or what another person may think, what I think, what's another perspective I can take. And I have like 10, it's not exactly 10, but I have a whole bunch of things floating as possibilities in the air for me.
Right.
Right. And why I resonate with that part of the book is because by gauging what percent you believe, whatever it is that you believe,
Right.
um, it adds this thing where it lets you feel like you could be open to another perspective being true.
Right.
And that thing that I do, it helps me to not take anything 100%. For instance, like for example, if let's say I got, so here's the thing, we're all, even if you know all of this stuff, you're still subject to biases. You can still go in and out of being in the moment. You
Right.
could go in and out of being in scout or soldier. It happens.
Yeah,
You
you have
could
to use the
dwell,
tools.
right, and you could dwell in one mindset or another for, let's say, most of the time probably.
Mhm.
But yeah, so oh no, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh,
Well,
that's horrible.
I think okay. So the point that I was getting from you is that you try to stay away from being 95 or 100% sure of something. You try to keep an open mind and look at other perspectives, right?
Oh, right. So here's the example I was going to give. If let's say I was, this is like, let's say years ago, I was in a mode of, let's say jealousy or something, right? Or I
Mhm.
was paranoid that somebody's doing something with this partner, with a girl, whatever. And I'm like, and then I'm like, yeah, but like, how true is that? Like, am I, even if I feel like this is right and I have this weird feeling in me, like uncomfortable, and I think this is true or whatever,
Mhm.
what other possibilities could exist?
Right.
Then I think of all the other possibilities instead of being married to the jealousy perspective. then those other ones draw me away from 100% certainty into this reactive notion of what could be happening, which is good because I mean, I suppose as you could contrast that with somebody who would fall to prey to it 100%, maybe talk to that person, their partner, and then project a whole bunch of negativity onto them
Right.
or something like that, and completely self-sabotage and create some weird, spiral of just bad
Yeah,
situation.
you're running. You avoid it, right? You find a way to get rid of the situation.
Well, so by thinking of all these different perspectives, it draws me away from that reactive impulse,
Right.
which I instinctively, or not instinctively, I just intuitively understand that reactiveness, if it's not something you would choose to feel, this is not from the book. This is now just, I'm drawing this from other things I learned, but uh, I know that anytime I'm being reactive, it's not, I'm not in fully in the driver's seat. It
Right.
feels like I'm being driven by this emotion that's creating all these rationalizing thoughts
Mhm.
that's sort of pulling me into belief into them, and then it tricks you into feeling like you're contributing to that narrative
Right.
that started out intrusively, and it creates a sort of infinite feedback, not infinite, but definitely some kind of positive feedback loop of
Right.
just negative thoughts that feed into a narrative.
Yeah, and
And yeah,
in CBT, we would say that that's activating your core beliefs. So it's like if your core belief is I shouldn't trust anybody, somebody seems like they're deceiving you, you're like, oh, there we go. It fits what I already believe.
yeah, but it's also like if you know that can't be right, even though like you instinctively want to believe it,
Mhm.
I feel like at that point you're inching away from that 100% soldier mindset, let's
Yes.
say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
it's rough.
and I like that you brought that up because she has this great section where she talks about those core beliefs. So I'm not going to do it justice. So I'm not going to try to exactly explain everything that she said about it. But I like how she created this network and she said, look, changing one belief is like a cascade, right? Or it could become a cascade where if you change like the sort of surface belief of, let's say, climate change isn't real, right? Then you have to actually now, well, you would probably have to start maybe from the foundation and then kind of like move your way up, right? Or you would have to keep going into the foundation. So it's like if let's say the person is, let's say, oh, I'm going to read it because I don't want to butcher what she said. I'd feel bad.
Is that part in the towards the end with the paradigm stuff?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hold on, let me just find it. So not a scout identity. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay, so the belief is so okay, like so she wrote that's okay. So let's say the belief climate change isn't real, quote unquote, is supported by other beliefs Kevin, who her example was of, holds about the world, how the world works, and which sources are trustworthy. For Kevin to significantly update the belief climate change isn't real, he'll have to also update a few of his associated beliefs, such as climate change, skeptic media outlets are more trustworthy than the mainstream media, or smart people don't buy that climate change or its climate science consensus. So that can happen, she says, but it will take a lot more evidence than the single article from a news source since Kevin doesn't currently, from a news source Kevin doesn't currently trust. You're right. So the idea there is that if you're changing the sort of climate changes in real belief, right, you also have to obviously kind of try to combat the other beliefs. So in this case, she doesn't frame it as like here are the core beliefs and here are like the external or more external beliefs, which is
Mhm.
what we do in CBT. But she's pretty much saying like it's this network of beliefs, and if we change one, we have to actually try our best to change the other. Because like let's say if you convince this person, let's say his belief is climate change isn't real, and you show him evidence against that, his other belief, I would call this a more core belief. Smart people don't buy the climate science consensus is going to be challenged, right? So now he's stuck in this like tension. He's like, okay, here's I see this evidence, but if I'm a smart person, right, I have to resist the evidence. I have to kind of rebel against it because if I buy into it, then that means I'm stupid. So the idea there is like only stupid people believe in evidence for climate change. So if that's his kind of assumption, right, and then the belief on top of that is, let's say this particular data set is real, which is what you're showing him. then the idea is that like if you somehow prove to him that the data set is real, and let's say he's like, oh shit, no, this does seem real, he's not going to be able to stay in that tension of the data set is real, but then stupid people buy into climate change, right? So that person is not going to want that, right? So obviously they're going to be motivated to explain the data set away in a way that says, it's probably cherry picked evidence, or this person, or maybe they fudge the data, right? Or maybe they just completely made these numbers up. So they'll
Mhm.
find a way to explain it that fits the belief of like, yeah, stupid people only buy into, or only stupid people buy into climate change. So the idea there, I think, where a lot of people get stuck, myself included, where you're sort of battling full on ideologies as opposed to just particular beliefs, right? So it's like when you're trying, even again, a good example of this is when you're trying to convince a vaccine skeptic, right? If you
Mhm.
actually, like, I know people who are vaccine skeptics, they actually don't trust anybody. So if you talk to some of these people, they'll tell you like, oh, I don't trust the government. I don't trust scientists. I don't trust big pharma, right? So if you're convincing them that like, no, vaccines that are actually good for you and they pose very minimal risk, now you're challenging their belief that like, oh, wow, maybe big pharma isn't all corrupt. Maybe the government does care about us. And that's just, it's so much work, because that kind of core that founds the belief of like was the foundation of the belief that vaccines are bad is incredibly hard to change, because we're talking about these black and white, or these overgeneralized systems and ways of seeing the world, where the idea there is, even fundamentally, it's that people in authority can't be trusted, right? So now you're challenging the belief of people in authority can't be trusted, but then you're showing them that people in authority should be trusted. That's going to cause this tension that they're just going to find a way to explain themselves out of.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. And also there was this I probably you're gonna recall it now. I was almost mentioning it earlier in the book, where there were these thought experiments, conformity bias,
Yeah.
thought experiment, double standard,
Right.
and so on. So what I liked about it was what it was designed to do is sort of to help you um, attain this sort of scout's mindset or get an insight into what that's like.
Right.
So, for example, the double standard one, I like the example she used. There was this guy. He was in school. Is a school kid.
Yeah.
Wow.
School
Anyway,
kid.
school kid. Hey,
Yeah.
everybody. Anyway, so it was yeah, it was this student, and it was a class of 230 males and maybe 30 females,
Right.
something like that. And he would observe and that all the girls were going for the most attractive, most athletic, uh, best guys in the group,
Best
right?
looking guys. Best
Best
looking.
looking
Yeah.
guys.
Mhm.
Yeah. And he wasn't
Yeah.
he didn't match like a lot of those.
Right.
He
Right.
wasn't so confident. He wasn't that athletic, and he
Or
didn't match
attractive.
that
Right.
description. Or if he was not as attractive, whatever.
Good.
Um, I'll give him something. I don't want to,
You don't know the
completely
guy.
kill this guy. Well, whatever. Okay. So whatever, just being kind. But anyway,
He's good at
um,
chess.
he's good at chess. So anyway, yeah. So he then all of a sudden he started to come. He started working from soldier's mindset, and he started thinking, um, "Wow, these girls are all stuck up bitches. They only want the most popular, most athletic, whatever guy,
Yeah.
right?"
Yeah. Mhm.
And but then in her example of the thought experiment, he decided to think, wait a second, double standard. If I were if it were 200 girls and only 30 guys, and I was also picking out of all the girls like who I would date, of course I would pick the most attractive, most beautiful,
Right.
whoever, that I would be able to get the best one out of
Right.
them, like
Mhm.
whatever according to my value system.
Right.
When he started to think like that, it nixed away his belief of yeah, they're all stuck up bitches, they're all like some kind of weird negative projection onto the girls. It helped him to see that maybe something else is going on that needs addressing, and it gave him a more accurate understanding of the situation. And she didn't go on to say this, but like this is just my take on it. I think that's good to come to that realization, because then, I mean, imagine you're walking around with the paradigm that women are all stuck up bitches or something like that. Or wouldn't you just by pure just confirmation bias alone
Yeah.
try to seek out examples of that?
Yeah.
And then wouldn't that ruin any like chances of having a normal relationship.
Yeah, and it might
Probably
yeah, and it can also cause you to think things that aren't true. Like remember, what was his name? I think it was Elliot Rodger, the Isla Vista
yeah,
killings. Right, that was him. Right. Remember, it was like this good-looking fucking kid, like super attractive guy, right? Like whatever he was, like 17, 18 years old.
had a
He's
car, money.
yeah, bro. And then he's like, oh, all of these girls don't give me the time of day, even though he's never approached any of them. Let's say he probably, give or take, got rejected by a few girls, like at some point in his life, and then overgeneralized and was like, oh, fuck all of them. They're all rejecting me. I'm never going to get laid or whatever it was. Even though, like, if that kid literally just put himself out there, he probably would have gotten a, if let's say the norm for people is like 1 out of 10, like guys, getting a date, I think for him it could be at least 2 to 3 out of 10 because he seems to have a lot going for them. But yeah, for him. So, but the delusion there is that like, oh, because whatever these people rejected me, everybody's rejected me. So yeah, so why I like the mindset of maybe I would do the same thing or whatever it is that if you're putting yourself in other people's shoes, right? First of all, hopefully you see that not everybody's rejecting you. But then the other thing is you could see like, oh yeah, I would have rejected some of these girls too. Like even the sorority, like some of those girls, I'm sure he wouldn't have wanted to date all of them. But the way he saw it was that like it's me against the enemy.
Yeah. And it's fine to acknowledge, for instance, like, okay, so again, self delusions or positive delusions, like I'm the best, I'm amazing, I am God's gift to women,
Right.
whatever,
Right.
if you believe in something like that 100%, yeah, sure, it stands to reason that you would look for evidence of that belief and you would act in such a way that conforms to that belief. Okay, that's cool and all, right? But anytime you would eh, encounter evidence to the contrary, well, it depends on the person's temperament, but either they're going to react horribly,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or they're just going to miss the reality. They'd be like, oh, no, 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 they're just stupid. They don't know
Right.
what they're talking about and all that. And
Right.
I feel like that creates distance between the possible relationships you could or the types of relationships you could have with people,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you were more accurate, like if you said, all right, I'm not as if you said, okay, confidence is important, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, being delusionally confident is not useful,
Right.
right? It probably serves you, you know, it probably does serve you to cultivate real core confidence as opposed to this sort of delusional sort of
Right.
confidence, because that's also less flimsy. You also, if you ever encountered anything that you also wouldn't react if you had real core confidence.
Yeah.
And what is core confidence? That's a different conversation. But if you had real core confidence, if somebody didn't like you don't necessarily have to say it's because they're a bitch or whatever, blah blah blah. It could be
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, it just didn't work, or the things didn't align in a certain way. Maybe this person's having a bad day. Maybe actually something in my behavior was a little off-putting, or
Right.
maybe something in my something I did,
Mm-hmm.
which is fine because I'm not always going to do this thing.
Yep.
People aren't always going to reject. People
Mm-hmm.
aren't always going to accept.
Yep.
You know, I'm not always going to be in my most optimal state of
Yeah.
whatever, state of consciousness, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and it's fine if something happens that's not supposed to happen, or sometimes something good happens too, but you don't have to also draw a whole narrative on that good thing, because that could also lead to a sort of self-delusion.
Yeah.
And again, it's good not to be deluded, because then I don't know, I feel like you have more honest relationships, but I feel like I'm just adding that. It's not like Julia Galef really says that exactly in the book. Her thing is just more about,
Yeah. It's for
well,
yourself. It's for yourself. It's like, yeah,
or
you're sort
truth
of,
seeking,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, the idea is that you benefit from it, but I do remember her mentioning something about relationships, that people will want to be around you, and that obviously you'll have like deeper friendships, obviously, because there's more intimacy.
Yeah, I don't, I feel bad because I don't like to sometimes put words in the author's mouth. So I'm trying to say, like, there are certain things I just said before. There's a little
Okay.
bit of my own imposition,
Hmm.
but she probably would go with it. I just don't want to say she is putting that out there. But
I hear you.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So before we wrap up, what do you feel like was for you the most important point of the book?
Well, so here's the thing. I think it was important to draw a distinction between self-delusion and truth seeking,
Hmm.
because while so here's, it's not like I didn't know some of this stuff that was already in the book,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was
It's a great
valuable.
addition. It's a great addition to critical thinking literature, right?
Well, let me put it to you this way also. There's some things that you know once you hear it in the book, it sounds like, oh yeah, this is obvious, or this is stuff I've thought about before, all that. But we all we forget things sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
right? We're not always walking around with this information fresh in our heads, right?
Hmm.
For instance, like, yeah, I read Power of Now however long ago, and yeah, I still employ a lot of things from that book. But I promise you, if I read it again, there are certain things that I'd be like, oh yeah, right, this part, and now I feel a little bit differently, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Hmm.
I know it's very general, but also, while thinking about these biases that I could have, or what could be flawed about my thinking, or, let's have as accurate of a map of the world as possible. It felt like it was valuable to me because it showed me that, like, I should be honest with myself about what I know, what I don't know,
Hmm.
what I could do to improve my situation.
Yep.
Ooh,
Right. You pretty
yeah.
much realize, or at least re-realize, that you're the one who practically benefits in the end of clear thinking.
Well, yeah, that simply that, sure.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I suppose it made me be a little, also very self-reflective about my current beliefs, right? Because, for example, I was listening to the audiobook while walking around outside, and I would have certain feelings in my body when I was thinking about different biases and, like, forms of self-delusion. Not that I felt like I was self-deluding, but
Yeah.
it's funny when your attention is drawn there, because then you start to ask yourself, oh, where is my self-delusion? Is there self-delusion?
Right.
And I think that's valuable, because sometimes you don't think like that. Sometimes you're
Mhm.
caught up in just um, the goings on of life, or you get caught up in the small stuff. You forget about these kinds of things that are pointed out in the book.
Right. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. What about you?
All right. Let's see. Okay. I need like a second to think about it.
Oh, can
Um,
I add one thing then while
well,
you're
okay. What's up? What's up?
so also, not just what I got from the book, but why I think it's like so valuable for a whole bunch of people.
Hmm.
I mean, I mean, really, it's kind of like what we're about, right? It's basically telling you to think in nuanced ways, to be able to take on new beliefs.
Hmm.
Here's a label for a distinction between this kind of mindset and that kind of mindset,
Hmm.
which is very nice. It's a very nice structure to sort of provide to people, because, like, a lot of times we think about on the show, like, what's a good way to get people to critically think? What's a good way to get people to see nuance, to take on new beliefs,
Right.
to
Right.
be open, right?
Hmm.
And I like her structure. It's a very nice, here's what it's like to be a scout. Here's what it's like to be a soldier.
Right.
Here's ways to be like a scout. Here's the benefits of being a scout. Here's the benefits of being a soldier mindset.
Hmm.
Here are some examples, right? And it's very easy to understand.
Right.
And
Yeah.
um, it also doesn't feel too academic. It feels like a nice balance between being academic, but at the same time, um, if just a layman is reading it,
Hmm.
and that's no knock on anyone. And I'm just saying, like, somebody who's not interested in psychology or philosophy,
Right. Right.
or whatever. I feel like it's very easy to understand. It's very valuable. It's cool to put a percentage on how much you believe a certain thing. That's a nice phraseology. Like, again, like that thing I was describing earlier. Like, oh, I like to think of things, and I have certain perspectives floating up in clouds and all of that.
Right.
That's
Right.
my view of that. But I like her structure, because mine is not. It's not something that I've created, like, a real structure for how to explain that to people.
Right.
Hers is a nice way of putting a percentage on how much you believe what you believe, and the use of that. So it's very structured, and it's nice.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I would say for me, the main point is not to take things personally. So what this book really, I think, adequately showed was that people like really fall into these biases consistently. So it's like if they're, so this is the way I see now criticism. I mean, maybe not now, but the way I see it now, like in this moment, not in the sense of like yesterday I saw it this way and today I see it this way, right? So let's say now in this moment, right? Which obviously is going to fluctuate. So the way I see criticism is it's one of two things, right? It's either that the person is giving you really important feedback, which you can use and help to grow, obviously, even though it's maybe not something you necessarily want to hear, or that feedback really is stemming from motivated reasoning, right? Where the person really is jealous. The person really is trying to sort of sabotage you and take you down. They're really trying to make you feel bad about yourself, etc. So the idea there is if you paint criticism in that kind of light, it's one of two things, and both of them are really helpful to know, and both of them are really kind of benign, right? As if you see it that way. So if you see it in the way of like, well, this is trying to help me grow, great. Obviously, then I could use it, I could incorporate it, I could become better at whatever this thing is that I'm doing. And then if it's the other thing, right, if it is somebody trying to sabotage me, then that's more of a reflection of them than anything to do with me. Even if somebody says like, hey, you're unattractive, you're stupid, or whatever it is, and then I'm like, okay, but what does somebody what does somebody do with that, right? Like I'm like, you're not really trying to help me, and if you're not trying to help me, you're trying to put me down. Likelihood is I guess you feel that way, and you're probably projecting onto me. Great, goodbye. I don't want to even think about it. So for me, that's like the most important takeaway. That criticism, and this is something I've struggled with my entire life. Criticism is something that, if you can kind of like really think it through, doesn't have to be taken as sort of harshly and as critically and even as personally as you would, otherwise, or as I used to do. So, all right,
I think
man.
that's
Well, go ahead. Last thought. Last few
I
thoughts.
no, I think that's very valuable. And yeah, let's end it here. Yeah. So
Yeah. So,
guys,
guys, you get the book. Just for you guys, I hope the conversation was somewhat enlightening, and I would really get the book. For me, as I'm sure for you too, Alan, this book is literally one of the most important books I've read on critical thinking, all the way back to Kahneman. When we're talking about philosophy books, the pop philosophy books by like Julian Bagani, who
mm,
talks about where he talks about like different logical fallacies that people fall into, and obviously Kahneman's work and Amos Tversky. This is kind of one of those books that really belongs in the like Hall of Fame of critical thinking literature.
yeah, and if you guys want to find it, it's on Amazon, Audible, wherever you get your books. Again, it's called the Scout's Mindset: Why Some People See Things Clearly and Others Don't by Julia Galef.
Yep.
And yeah, that's our show. If you guys liked it, like, subscribe, follow. You can follow us at Seize the Moment Podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and at Seize_podcast on Twitter.
Yep.
Yeah, like, subscribe, hit the
Yeah,
bell as
do all of that
always.
stuff, please. Yeah, just spread the word if you like it.
That's right. And yeah, guys, thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.